Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening. The kids saw the intimate gesture between the two adults and exchanged cheeky glances with each other. However, when the couple was walking toward them, they pretended not to notice and continued talking about the rides that they were going to take at the amusement park later. A while later, everyone got into the car, looking forward to the rest of the day. Lucian took them to a diner for breakfast before heading to the amusement park. As they had arrived during peak hour, the amusement park was extremely crowded. While navigating their way past the other patrons, Roxanne could not help but be reminded of their previous trip to the hot spring resort, where Benny got lost. Suddenly, she was filled with apprehension. Sensing the woman's unease, Lucian squeezed her hand and said, "If you are worried, I can get them to clear the area." Upon hearing that, Roxanne returned to her senses and shook her head. With a faint smile on her face, she replied, "It's okay. The kids won't have as much fun if you do that." Benny knew that his mother was worried about him and lifted his arm to show her the smartwatch on his wrist. Mommy, it's all right. We are all wearing smartwatches. If you can't find us, you can always give us a call." Archie and Estella chimed in and said, yup. We will stick close to you." Roxanne smiled after hearing the kids' assurances. Stroking their heads affectionately, she said, "I just want you guys to have fun." With that, the little ones headed to their first attraction. Roxanne accompanied them on a few kiddie rides, but the kids were still not satisfied. "Mommy, let's take the roller coaster." Benny's eyes sparkled with anticipation as he watched the roller coaster whiz past him. Roxanne hesitated before replying, "You are too young to be on a roller coaster. Let's go for something else instead." After she finished saying that, Lucian reminded in a deep voice, "I saw a roller coaster for children just now. They can try that." Just as Roxanne was about to agree, Benny rejected that proposition. That's not exciting at all. We want to try this one." Roxanne was at a loss as to what to do. The children were indeed below the age limit for roller coaster rides. Even if Lucian somehow managed to get them on, Roxanne would still be worried. While she was pondering over a way to convince the kids to give up the idea, Archie suddenly spoke. "Mommy, if we are not allowed to take the ride, can you and Mr. Farwell go for it on our behalf instead? Then we can treat it as we have already tried it." Benny and Estella nodded in agreement. Hearing that, Roxanne subconsciously glanced at the man beside her. She did not mind doing that if it would make the kids happy, but Lucian did not seem like the sort of person who would be interested in amusement park rides. In fact, she was unable to imagine him on a roller coaster. "Mr. Farwell. Daddy." The little ones started coaxing the man when they realized that their target should be Lucian instead. Roxanne did not want to put Lucian in a tight spot and was about to reject the suggestion on his behalf when Lucian suddenly said to the kids with a serious expression, "No problem. But the three of you have to be good and wait here. Don't run about or go off with strangers, okay?" Hearing the man's positive reply, the children jumped for joy and replied sweetly, "We will wait here patiently." Then, they started urging Roxanne and Lucian to join the line for the ride. Since Lucian had already agreed, Roxanne could only keep quiet and allow Lucian to take her hand and lead her toward the queue. "If you're reluctant to do it, I'll help you explain it to the kids," Roxanne said worriedly. They were stuck in a crowd, and she could see that Lucian was uncomfortable. Lucian turned to look at the three children waiting for them close by, and his gaze softened. It's all right. As long as they like it." His gaze then shifted toward Roxanne. "As for you, remember to hold tight onto me if you get scared later." Roxanne was startled when her eyes met with his mischievous ones. She lowered her head as mixed feelings surged within her heart. Throughout the years, she had brought Archie and Benny to an amusement park many times. The two children had mentioned wanting to go on a roller coaster countless times, but were never able to. Before that day, they had never mentioned wanting her to represent them to go on the roller coaster either. Perhaps they thought that I would be afraid. It was not until today, with Lucian's appearance, that they dared to ask her such a request. They had looked at her with anticipation too, not a hint of worry in their eyes. Maybe they thought Lucian would protect me on their behalf. Even I myself think so too. Roxanne looked up and flashed Lucian a grin. A thanks. As she said that, a gust of wind blew and messed up her hair. Lucian reached out to smooth the messy locks and said, I should be the one to thank you for giving me another chance. The two stood out because of their good looks and impressive aura. The people around them subconsciously kept a distance but could not help stealing glances at them. Upon witnessing that scene, someone could not control their impulsiveness and took a photo of them. However, that person had forgotten to turn off the flash of their phone. The bright light flashed Roxanne in the eyes and snapped her back to her senses. She then turned in the direction of the person taking their photo. That woman smiled awkwardly and said, "Sorry. The two of you looked so cute together. Can I please save this picture? That is, if you don't mind." Roxanne could not bear to reject the woman's request after hearing how sincere she was, but she was not the only one in the picture. She turned to Lucian, seeking his opinion on the matter. In response, Lucian turned to glance at the woman who took their photo. That woman was facing Roxanne, so she could only see Lucian's side profile. When Lucian looked over, she was amazed by his handsomeness. In the next second, she was also overwhelmed by his aura and got so nervous that she almost wanted to delete the photo. Send me a copy of it." Lucian took out his phone and added the woman on WhatsApp. Both the person who took the photo and Roxanne were dumbfounded. The woman was stunned momentarily before she returned to her senses. Her hands were shaking in excitement as she handed her phone to Lucian. "Who would have thought I could add this handsome man on WhatsApp because I secretly took a photo?" After adding each other on WhatsApp, the woman followed Lucian's instructions and sent the photo to him. Lucian opened the photo to take a look and seemed to be satisfied with it. He then tapped on his phone a few more times. Soon, that woman received a new message. She had just received a bank transfer of 10,000. "You don't need to pay me. I only took the photo on a whim. It wasn't a good shot either." The woman who took the photo felt uneasy. Lucian said, "Your photography skills are not bad. You can delete the photo in your phone now." He put away his phone after saying that. The woman had no choice but to turn to Roxanne for help. She felt uneasy as she could not accept the money she felt she did not deserve. Roxanne felt her head ache as she said, "Take it and delete the photo on your phone. Treat it as us buying the photo from you." In the end, the woman accepted the money under Roxanne's reassurance. She also deleted Lucian's WhatsApp in front of Roxanne. Lucian raised his eyebrows but kept quiet. It was not until they got on the roller coaster that Roxanne realized the woman was afraid Roxanne would mind it if she did not delete Lucian's WhatsApp. Just as she was lost in her thoughts, the staff had helped them with their seatbelts and done a double check. The roller coaster then started to move. "A good luck, Mommy." "A good luck, Miss Jarvis." The three children's shouts of good luck could be heard outside the fence. Roxanne turned to smile at the children as she slowly relaxed. As the roller coaster gained speed, it went higher up the slope. It was only then that Roxanne started to feel scared. They were also seated in the first row. The people behind them were shouting their lungs out. Roxanne felt her throat tighten in fear, and her breath caught in her throat. Just as she felt she was about to suffocate, Lucian reached over and gripped her hand tightly. Roxanne slowly relaxed as soon as she felt his presence and breathed in and out at a steady pace. She instinctively turned to look at the person beside her. People behind them screamed, and some were even cursing, yet Lucian remained calm and expressionless. If it weren't for the rise and fall of his chest, Roxanne would have thought the person beside her was not real. Roxanne could not help but laugh after seeing his calm demeanor. She felt herself relax and started to scream alongside the people behind her at the thrill of the ride. Lucian loosened his grip on her hand. A smile slowly made its way onto his lips as he heard her scream without holding back. As the roller coaster came to a stop, Roxanne felt breathless from all the screaming. When she stood up, her vision turned black momentarily, and she almost fell forward. Luckily, Lucian was able to reach out and grab her in time before she made a fool out of herself. He held on to her as they walked out of the fenced area and made their way toward the 3 children waiting at the ride's exit. The kids hurried over when they saw Lucian and Roxanne come out. Noticing Roxanne's condition, they were worried. Mommy, are you okay?" Roxanne slowly caught her breath and smiled before nodding. "Yeah, I'm fine." She then turned to look at the expressionless person beside her and could not help but chuckle. "I want to go on it a few more times." The children did not know what Roxanne was laughing about and assumed that the roller coaster was very enjoyable. Benny balled his hands into fists. "When I grow up, I'll go on the roller coaster many times." Archie held on to Benny's hand and said, "I'll go with you." Estella joined in on the fun. "I want to go too." Archie and Benny replied in unison, "Sure, but you have to sit at the back." The children could not stop chattering among themselves. A smile appeared on Roxanne's lips at how innocent they were. Lucian glanced at the 3 children before shifting his gaze to Roxanne. Although Roxanne had said she was fine, her physiological reactions betrayed her as she still looked pale and uncomfortable. "I'll go get us something to drink." "Don't go anywhere," Lucian said in a deep voice. The children nodded obediently at him in response. Roxanne also subconsciously nodded. It was not until Lucian had left that she realized he was treating her like a kid. She could not help but laugh at the realization. Although the children did not understand why Roxanne was smiling, they followed suit and grinned. They smiled and laughed together as they talked about the roller coaster. Lucian returned from buying some water to see the children laughing and surrounding a smiling Roxanne. Lucian's expression softened at the scene. The children happily waved their hands to beckon Lucian over when they saw him return. Lucian hurried toward them and handed the drinks he had just bought to each of them as he listened to Roxanne and the children talk. "Were you scared just now?" Roxanne suddenly turned to look at him and asked. The children's gazes also fell onto him. Lucian shrugged and raised his eyebrows. "I went parachuting before. That was scarier than the roller coaster." Surprise flashed across Roxanne's eyes upon hearing that. With Lucian's personality, I thought he would never do something thrilling like that. Archie's and Benny's eyes lit up in excitement as they enthusiastically grabbed onto the hem of Lucian's shirt. "Mr. Farwell, bring us along the next time you go." Lucian lowered his gaze and smiled at Archie and Benny. He agreed without any hesitation. "All right. I'll take you when you're of suitable age." Upon hearing that, the 2 boys cheered. Roxanne felt emotional as she watched Archie and Benny interact with Lucian. Indeed, the kids need their father. She had always known Archie and Benny were bold and liked to try different activities. However, the 2 had always taken her feelings into account and were afraid that she might be scared, so they had never voiced these kinds of requests. Yet they were able to let themselves loose in front of Lucian. Perhaps they will grow up happier with Lucian around. Just as she felt her emotions overwhelm her, a small hand tugged on the hem of her blouse. Roxanne snapped back to her senses and looked down. Estella was looking up and staring unblinkingly at Roxanne with her big round eyes. "Essie, what's wrong?" Roxanne asked as she bent down. Estella wrapped her arms around Roxanne's neck endearingly and softly whispered in her ear, "Miss Jarvis, can I call you Mommy?" Her voice was soft and timid because her request had been rejected before. Upon hearing the question, Roxanne instinctively turned to look at Lucian, who was talking with Archie and Benny. The 3 of them did not seem to notice what was happening. Estella hurried to explain when she saw Roxanne was silent. "I just think that we look like a family. Besides, Miss Jarvis, didn't you already agree to let Daddy pursue you? We'll definitely be a family in the future." Hope and anticipation was written all over her face. Roxane was touched by Estella's words. She had indeed accepted Lucian's pursuit. However, she could not be too sure about the future. If I agree to Essie's request, I don't know how I'll face her if I disappoint her in the future. Roxane was hesitant as she pondered over it. Miss Jarvis. Estella thought she was going to be rejected again. Her eyes grew red, and it looked like she was about to cry. Roxane could not bear to reject the young girl when she heard the latter's broken voice. Hence, she tried to persuade Estella to call her a different name. Your daddy and I. She wanted to say they were not married yet, but realized that it was easy to cause misunderstandings if she did say that. Hesitating for a moment, she decided to skip the explanation. If you really want to call me a different name, how about you call me Aunt Roxane? Estella pouted. She did not seem too willing to call Roxane that. However, when she realized this was Roxane's compromise, she could only nod and say, "A-okay." Lucian, Roxane, and the three children had fun at the amusement park for the rest of the day. For dinner, Lucian brought them to a nearby high-end restaurant. I want to sit with Aunt Roxane. When they were about to be seated, Estella held onto Roxane's blouse tightly while wearing a prideful expression. Upon hearing how Estella addressed Roxane, Lucian, Archie, and Benny were taken aback and instinctively glanced at Roxane. Roxane was hesitant to meet Lucian's gaze as she said, "Essie wanted to call me that, so I agreed to it. If you don't like it, then..." Before she could finish her sentence, Lucian cut in with raised eyebrows. Personally, I feel there's a much closer term of address, but if that's what you want, let her address you that way for now." Lucian then ushered Archie and Benny to their seats. Since Estella wanted to sit with Roxane, Archie and Benny expressed through their actions that they wanted to sit with Lucian. In the end, Roxane and Lucian sat opposite each other, with the children by their sides. The three children were happy with the arrangement. Lucian glanced up and felt satisfied when he noticed that he could look at Roxane with this seating. Lucian had called ahead to order their meal, which consisted of the restaurant's signature dishes. In a thoughtful gesture, he even ordered ice cream for the children. The design of the ice cream was unique. The waiter did a little magic, and the ice cream turned different in a blink of an eye. The children clapped their hands in surprise and excitement. It was a habit for Roxane to put the children's plates in front of her and cut their steaks into bite-sized pieces. Unexpectedly, when she looked up, she saw Lucian was already doing that job for her. Lucian's head was bowed as he cut the steaks. There was no sign of impatience written on his face. As though sensing her looking at him, he met her gaze. Do you need me to help you too?" With that, he shifted his gaze to the untouched steak on her plate. Roxane was stunned momentarily. She then shook her head in embarrassment and said, I can do it myself." Without saying anything further, Lucian returned to cutting the steaks before placing them back onto the children's plates. Dinner was a heartwarming affair. In a corner they did not pay attention to, Sonia stared intently at the five of them harmoniously interacting with one another, and her expression darkened. Even if she had known earlier that Lucian and Roxane would get back together, she did not expect their relationship to have progressed that far. Any stranger would think that the five of them were a family. Sonia huffed in anger when she saw Lucian personally cut steak for the two bastards. "I raised him until he became an adult, yet he's never cut steak for me. How dare he go and serve someone else's sons? Just what in the world is he thinking? That Roxane doesn't look like a good person and already has two bastards, so why is my son dead set on being with her?" As Sonia watched the five of them get ready to leave after finishing dinner, she frowned and looked away, trying hard to suppress her anger. Although her seat was close to the door, no one paid much attention to her table since it was hidden by many houseplants. It was so hidden that Roxane and the others did not notice her even though they passed by her to get to the door. "Thank you, Aunt Roxane." Estella thanked Roxane after the latter gave her candy when they were at the door. Behind the houseplants, Sonia almost rushed out impulsively when she heard how Estella addressed Roxane. They got in the car after walking out of the restaurant. Lucian sat idly in the car for some time without starting the engine. Roxanne gave him a puzzled look. The moment she raised her head to look at him, she made eye contact with him. Roxanne was momentarily stunned. For some strange reason, she felt slightly nervous. After a moment, disappointment showed on Lucian's face. If only it's pouring rain right now. His words took Roxanne by surprise. The children looked at Lucian curiously. But we won't be able to go home if there's a rainstorm. Lucian smiled in response. He didn't say anything else and started the car. The kids were still perplexed because their father didn't give them a response. Roxanne, on the other hand, immediately understood Lucian's intentions after the children mentioned this. In other words, he was telling her that he didn't want to go home that night. Her face flushed crimson, and she didn't dare to look at him. It's getting late. Let's go back now. The kids must be tired. The children blinked in confusion upon hearing Roxanne's words. They could feel that the adults were insinuating something they couldn't understand. Nevertheless, they didn't say anything. On the way home, Roxanne couldn't fathom if Lucian was deliberately driving slowly in an effort to put the kids to sleep. Roxanne lowered her head and stared into space blankly as she was also slightly tired. By the time she snapped back to reality, they had arrived at her house. Roxanne turned back to wake Archie and Benny so that they could get out of the car. Aunt Roxanne. Estella would be going home with Lucian now, so she was slightly reluctant to part with Roxanne. Roxanne gave her head a reassuring pat and uttered, You have stayed here for a long period. It's time to go home. Estella was still a little unwilling. At the thought of something, Roxanne looked at Lucian hesitantly. Before she could say anything, Lucian's voice rang out. I have let Caden handle the transfer procedures for Essie. She will return to her previous kindergarten from next week onward. Everyone's eyes lit up when they heard his words. Archie and Benny hugged Estella excitedly. That's amazing. We can go to the kindergarten together again. A smile spread across Estella's face too. Roxanne felt as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She smiled at Estella and said, You can meet Archie and Benny in the kindergarten from now on. If you want to, you can come here occasionally and live with me for a few days. The delight of transferring kindergartens replaced Estella's reluctance of leaving Roxanne. She nodded her head obediently after hearing Roxanne's words. Then, you have to go fetch Archie and Benny from the kindergarten, Aunt Roxanne. Roxanne assented with a laugh. Lucian started the car engine. Bye, Mr. Farwell. The two boys waved at him. Lucian nodded and turned to look at Roxanne, waiting for her to say something. Roxanne still felt shy because of what he had said earlier. Meeting his eyes and with a blush, she mumbled, Goodbye. Lucian lifted his brow. He was obviously displeased. Roxanne frowned in embarrassment and hesitated for a moment before saying, See you on Monday. If she wasn't mistaken, they would have to meet as they would be picking up their kids on Monday. Lucian smiled in satisfaction. See you on Monday. With that, he hit the gas and drove toward the Farwell residence. Only after Lucian had driven far away did Roxanne turn around and return to the mansion with Archie and Benny. Roxanne wanted to send them upstairs to rest when the doorbell suddenly rang. Archie and Benny thought it was Lucian returning with Estella. They ran to open the door excitedly despite Roxanne stopping them. When they saw the person standing before them at the door, they were taken aback. Where's Roxanne? Sonia glanced at the children in disdain. Archie and Benny were disappointed when they were suddenly met with their grandmother's overt dislike after just having a great time with Lucian. The smile on their faces gradually faded, replaced by a wary expression. Sonia didn't expect them to reply. She turned to look at the living room after asking the question and immediately saw Roxanne, who was walking over. As soon as Roxanne heard Sonia's voice inside the house, she hurried outside out of concern for her children. Mrs. Farwell, it's late. Is something the matter?" She proceeded to shield the kids behind her back calmly before meeting Sonia's eyes coolly. Sonia sized her up. Let's go in and talk." A crease appeared between Roxanne's brows. After a moment of hesitation, she stood aside for Sonia to come in. It's just Sonia by herself. She will, at most, utter a few unpleasant words. If she were to be with Lucian, she would have to face Sonia sooner or later. When the kids saw that Roxanne had let Sonia in, they felt slightly nervous and worried that Sonia would bully her, just like Aubrey and Frida had. Roxanne watched Sonia sit on the couch and squatted down to look at Archie and Benny. "You guys head on upstairs and get some rest. I have some words to say to her." Archie grabbed his mother's hand with concern. "Should we want to accompany you?" Benny nodded fervently. Roxanne felt warmth in her heart when she saw how worried the kids were. She gave them reassuring pats on their heads. "Don't worry. We're only talking. Nothing will happen. You guys have played the entire day and must be tired. Go upstairs and wash up." The two boys were still slightly reluctant. Feeling helpless, Roxanne turned to glance at Sonia. Seeing that Sonia was not looking at them, she promised the kids, "Even if we fight, she's no match for me. You guys know that." The boys recalled Roxanne defending herself against two people and finally nodded. Before they headed upstairs, the kids greeted Sonia politely. "Good night, Mrs. Farwell." Sonia snorted and pretended as if she didn't hear or see them. The kids felt disappointed but didn't say anything. They turned around and headed upstairs. Roxanne walked into the living room after that. She brewed Sonia and herself a cup of coffee and sat on the couch beside her. It's just the two of us now. You don't have to pretend anymore. I'm not falling for it." Sonia glanced at the cup of coffee Roxanne had placed in front of her. She had no intention of hiding her disdain for Roxanne. Roxanne replied calmly, "It's basic courtesy. Even if it's Miss Pearson here, I'll do the same. If you don't like it, you don't have to drink it." Sonia trembled with rage upon seeing Roxanne's nonchalant demeanor. She pushed the cup of coffee away and looked at Roxanne coldly. "Tell me, what does it take for you to stay away from my son? Is it money that you're after? No matter the request, I'll satisfy you if I can do it." Roxanne felt a strange sense of familiarity upon hearing Sonia's words. She found Sonia's actions hilarious when she suddenly thought about how similar the latter's words sounded to those TV dramas and novels. Unaware of it, Sonia continued, 6 years ago, you were the one who decided to leave Lucian. No one forced you to do so. Do you think the Farwell residence is somewhere you can come and go as you please?" Roxanne tried to suppress her emotions and thoughts when Sonia brought up what had happened 6 years ago. "You've got the wrong idea. It's not something I can decide on my own, whether it was my leaving 6 years ago or how far I have progressed with Lucian now." Sonia didn't expect Roxanne's retort, and she grew displeased. Roxanne continued to state matter-of-factly, "Even though you guys were aware of Lucian's feelings for Aubrey 6 years ago, you forced me to stand in the way of their relationship because your family needed a joyous event to bring Lucian's grandfather good luck. I had no choice but to leave after suffering from Lucian's cold treatment for 3 years." She was admitting that the reason for her leaving 6 years ago was because of the Farwell family. This was what Roxanne had always believed in. Except for the infant girl who passed away, she didn't feel sorry for anyone for leaving 6 years ago. "I was crestfallen when I left 6 years ago. I only came back for work. It wasn't my intention to progress so far with my relationship with Lucian." Roxanne stared at Sonia. "If you can't accept me, you should tell Lucian. I have no say in this." Sonia was angered by her words. Lucian was with Aubrey for 6 years. You ruined their relationship, yet you don't feel an ounce of guilt. Instead, you're blaming the Farwell family? If you didn't wish for this to happen, why did you come back? Why must you come back to Horrington to work? Can't you find a job anywhere else? She was being unreasonable. Roxanne frowned, but she remained calm as she retorted, this is not up to me either. You can go and ask my professor. Sonia widened her eyes in anger. I don't care what you're trying to achieve here. You listen very carefully. As long as I'm alive, I'll never let you become a part of the Farwell family. Also, Lucian is my son. I know him best. You didn't even get him to fall in love with you for 3 years. Why do you think he will like you after 6 years? Besides, you have 2 illegitimate children. No matter what Sonia said, Roxanne remained calm and indifferent, as if she wasn't taking Sonia's words seriously. However, she wouldn't allow Sonia to talk about Archie and Benny like that. Her expression darkened instantly. Mrs. Farwell, please consider your age. What's the point of dragging 2 children around when you're settling adult matters between us adults? You keep saying that you're thinking of the reputation of the Farwell family, but don't you think you have disgraced the family by saying that about 2 innocent children? Sonia noticed Roxanne's change in expression and felt pleased. She continued to provoke her. Did I say anything wrong? How old are the 2 children? I think they're about 5 to 6 years old. You gave birth to them for another man after leaving the Farwell family for less than a year. You said you love Lucian. I think you only love his wealth. Now that you're back in the country, you behave as if Lucian did you wrong. Do you think you can trick me? Sonia thought she had successfully provoked Roxanne. Little did she know that the more she talked, the more ridiculous Roxanne found her. Sonia is able to overthink so much after I faked Archie's and Benny's ages. If she finds out who Archie and Benny are and recalls what she said today, I wonder how she will react. Roxanne remained expressionless. If you think so, then that's exactly it. Sonia was downright infuriated by her nonchalant response. If that's the case, leave Lucian and Essie alone. I know of your tactics to get close to Lucian. Roxanne gave her a confused look. I don't even know my tactics. Sonia bellowed. You're making use of the fact that Essie likes you. Do you think you can become Essie's mother through this? Don't even think about it. It will never be you. You're only lucky you have 2 children similar to Essie's age. Once Aubrey gives birth in the future, Essie will like her too. Sonia thought it was ironic when she heard what Estella called Roxanne at the restaurant. It also reminded her that Roxanne didn't know that Estella was her own daughter. If Roxanne were to find out, she wouldn't have let Estella call her Aunt Roxanne. Sonia planned to use this to drive Roxanne away from her son. The family will do whatever it takes to find Essie's mother. She will be the next Mrs. Farwell. It will never be you. Sonia sounded determined. Roxanne furrowed her brows in surprise. No matter what it takes. Does that mean that the Farwell family doesn't know who Essie's mother is? Does Lucian know? Sonia was furious upon seeing Roxanne lost in thought. She suppressed her anger and enunciated, while I'm still speaking to you nicely, you'd better be sensible. Take what you want and leave Horrington. Otherwise, don't blame me for not considering that you were once my daughter-in-law. Roxanne snapped back to reality, and her lips curled into a wry smile. Since when have you ever cared about that? Sonia had never treated her as her daughter-in-law. It sounded like a joke to Roxanne. Sonia stiffened, not knowing how to reply to this. Roxanne took a sip of her coffee. She didn't even cast Sonia a glance as she uttered, Also, you can't give me what I want. I will pretend as if we didn't have this conversation today. It's getting late. You should head back. After a long moment, Sonia finally said stiffly, you should know what's good for you. Roxanne opened the door for her calmly. I won't be seeing you off. It was so obvious she was chasing Sonia out of the house. It would be awkward if Sonia continued to stay. After a moment of consideration, Sonia walked out of the mansion with a grim expression. Roxanne immediately closed the door behind her. She had wanted to have a proper discussion with Sonia, but she didn't realize that the latter would be this hostile toward her. She had had no choice but to face her head-on. In fact, Sonia's statement that she was looking for Estella's mother left her with a deep impression. She did not expect that the Farwell family still didn't know who Estella's mother was. If the woman is unwilling to reveal herself, does that mean I can truly take care of Essie in her stead? Archie and Benny got up really early on Monday morning. They had already prepared warm milk and sandwiches by the time Roxanne made her way down the stairs. She chuckled in amusement when she saw how excited they were. "Hurry up and eat your breakfast, Mommy. You need to send us to the kindergarten soon," Benny said while handing her the glass of warm milk. Roxanne nodded with a smile and joined them for breakfast before getting into the car with them. Archie and Benny had been somewhat depressed since Estella transferred to another kindergarten. Now that Estella had returned, Archie and Benny were excited about attending classes again. Upon arriving at the kindergarten, Roxanne saw Estella standing next to Lucian while he spoke to Pippa and Jeffrey. Mr. Farwell. Essie." Archie and Benny shouted excitedly from the car window. Roxanne couldn't help but smile as she brought them out of the car. The boys hurried up to Estella and gave her a big hug from both sides. "Welcome back, Essie." Estella had been a little nervous when she saw Pippa earlier, but the sight of Archie and Benny brought a huge smile to her face. After saying hi to Estella, Archie and Benny turned around to greet Pippa and Lucian. "Good morning, Ms. Ward." "Good morning, Mr. Farwell." It had been a long time since Pippa had seen them smiling so happily. Jeffrey, on the other hand, didn't pay the boys much attention. He had read Roxanne's files and knew that she was just a doctor. He couldn't be bothered to try to butter her up. Lucian patted them on the heads in response. He was about to ask them where Roxanne was when he looked up and saw her standing in front of him. "Good morning, Miss Jarvis." Pippa greeted her warmly. Roxanne nodded and responded with a smile. "Ms. Ward, Mr. Bauer, good morning." She then lowered her head and shifted her gaze to Estella. Ever since Roxanne and Lucian fell apart, she had insisted on driving the boys to and from school herself in hopes of meeting Estella at the front gate, but she had never got a chance to see her. As such, she was delighted to finally see Estella after so long. "Aunt Roxanne." Estella called out to Roxanne in front of Pippa and Jeffrey, causing the two to freeze in shock. A few seconds later, Pippa regained her composure and glanced at Lucian. After making sure that he wasn't displeased with Estella's form of address, she flashed Roxanne a smile and said, "You and Essie sure are close." Noticing the innocent look in Estella's eyes, Roxanne figured it wasn't something worth hiding and gave her a pat on the head. "You need to be a good girl and listen to Ms. Ward, okay? Feel free to talk to Archie and Benny if you need anything." Estella nodded obediently in response. "We'll make sure to take good care of Essie. We won't let anyone bully her," Archie and Benny said in unison. Even though Roxanne didn't tell them anything, the boys knew that Estella must have been bullied in that new kindergarten. Frustrated that they couldn't get back at the bullies, they decided to do everything in their power to protect her instead. Having realized how important Roxanne was, Jeffrey was quick to reassure her, "Don't worry, Ms. Jarvis. The environment here at our kindergarten is very good, so you may rest assured that no one will bully her." Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.